And as I began to drink more and more, I wasn't drinking during the day, um, but I was drinking heavily at night. And as I drank more and more, several things began to happen. Some of these only available to me in hindsight, looking back. Some of them were I was aware of at the time. Decompensating was a huge thing. So I mean, my partners were all in the same position as me. They were all in a busy inner city general practice as well. They weren't drinking like I was drinking. I was using the if you had my life, you'd drink like me rationale, but it didn't stack up. Um, so the things that began to go were my interests, all the things that I used to enjoy doing. I was quite a passionate person. I get quite strong emotional ties to things and driven by things. I used to do a lot of writing, medical writing. All that began to go. It began to just kind of dissolve away. It became less important. Hobbies and recreational stuff used to be prominent and important, began to just melt off into the background. It got to the stage where unless alcohol was involved, I wasn't interested in doing it across the whole of the social scale. And I was tending towards friends who, if they didn't drink the same as me, at least my drinking wasn't remarked on or noticed. I was able to hide in certain social circles. And all of this, most of it was not seen. I didn't recognize it at the time. Other people probably saw more of it than I did. Again, I look back and think, how could you not see what was going on? I didn't want to. I mean, that's the largest part of me didn't want to. There were moments of almost epiphany. One of them was around my personal honesty. I was really aware and hugely uncomfortable with the fact I was lying a lot of the time to cover up why I wasn't able to go into work. I was missing, particularly Mondays, phone in and I'd have all these excuses and reasons why I couldn't get there. But I was so hungover and ill from the weekends drinking that I wasn't able to get to work. And it wouldn't have been safe for me to be there either. But rather than tell the truth, which would have been incredibly shameful, I was coming up with all these reasons which were dishonest. And I'm not actually an inherently dishonest person. So when you live like that against your own kind of sense of values, you just heap up on top of the shame mountain until it gets bigger and bigger, and you're carrying this burden of secrets and the shame attached to that, and the shame attached to the change in the behavior and the person I was becoming. So
self-esteem was going as well. Yeah.
Say that again.
Self-esteem was going because of all of this.
Self-esteem was terrible, and I was hiding behind the doctor persona, which is only really serves you up to a point. It's not. It's a mask. It's a very thin veneer. And if you just peel that away, you see this person. Looking back now, I can see it's a person who was desperately in need of help, a person who was really vulnerable. Yeah, I wasn't behaving very well, but there were reasons for that, and these reasons were remediable. You could address those reasons. And another kind of, so there was this genuine sense of I'm not happy with who I am becoming. I was aware of that. And then the other sort of epiphany was, well, there were a few of them, but one of them in particular I remember really strongly and very powerfully, and it relates to the shame of my position, was when the sister of a patient of mine came in to see me in the practice, and she was very worried about her brother, who I didn't know actually. He wasn't a frequent attender at the surgery. I don't think I'd met him. She was worried about him because he was drinking, and he was drinking around a bottle of spirits a day. And by this time, I wasn't far off that. And he had started to self-neglect. He wasn't showering. He wasn't eating. His house was a mess. And she thought he was going to die, and he possibly was actually. listening to the story. So he sounded in a pretty poor state. So I said I would come out and see him on a house call. And she said, "Oh no, he's too embarrassed to have you visit the house because it's such a mess." She said, I'll get him cleaned up as best I can and I'll bring him in." So we arranged a long appointment for the following week. It's quite interesting because looking at general practice these days, getting an appointment within a week is pretty much not the norm anymore. And getting a double appointment, that's remarkable. But however, back in the day, it was possible to do that. So I saw him, and yeah, he was really vulnerable and needed quite a bit of help. So we took a history, examined him, took some blood tests, referred him to the local alcohol clinic. And afterwards I thought, I was aware, I definitely was aware he was drinking about the same as me, but I also was aware I was helping him and I was sitting, running or being part of a general practice. And the two things were not that comfortable in my mind, but they were certainly separate, that his drinking and my drinking were different things. However, on the evening, so the afternoon finished and I started to get ready to go home. And on the way home, I stopped at one of the many corner shops that I had identified as sources of alcohol. I had to keep rotating so that nobody joined the dots. And I stopped at one of these corner shops, and I was standing in the queue with my whiskey bottle in the basket when I became aware of someone standing behind me. And I turned to look, and it was the sister of the man who'd been in to see me that afternoon. And here I was with my whiskey bottle in my basket. And at that moment, these two worlds collided, and I felt such a deep sense of shame. Now, she didn't know I was going to go home and drink the best part of that evening, but I did, and I was overwhelmed with the shame of it. And my answer to shame that night was to drink, but it was definitely part of a process of becoming ready to ask for help.